Hello everyone and welcome to week 3. This week we're going to cover chapter 14, which is on SEC reporting. And our first learning objective is to understand the SEC's structure and regulatory authority. The Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, they're an independent federal agency. And they were created in 1934, and they're responsible for regulating the securities markets. The ability of a company to raise capital in the stock markets and the high trading volumes are indications of the SEC's success in maintaining an effective marketplace for companies issuing securities and for investors seeking capital investments. And so let's look at a timeline of the SEC and kind of how they came about. So in the 13th century, King Edward established a court of aldermen to regulate security trades in London. And then in the 18th century, England's Parliament passed several acts called the Bubble Acts, and these were to control questionable security schemes. In 1790, there was the creation of the New York Stock Exchange, and this was to serve as a clearinghouse for security trades between its members. And then in 1911, states began passing what we call blue sky laws, and these were to regulate the offerings of securities by companies that didn't have any sound financial base. And in 1920s, the era of heavy stock speculation by many individuals was upon us. You've heard of the Roaring '20s. And then October 1929, this was the beginning of the Great Depression. And as a result of that, the Federal Securities Act of 1933 and 34 were passed as part of President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal legislation. This Security Act of 1933, it regulated the initial distribution of security issues by requiring companies to make full and fair disclosure of their financial affairs before their securities could be offered to the public. And in 1934, the Securities Exchange Act required all companies whose stock were traded on a stock exchange to periodically update their financial information. This is why we have published annual reports today. And then also created the Securities and Exchange Commission and assigned the responsibility of administering both the 1934 and the 1934 Acts to the SEC. So they have a legal responsibility to regulate types of securities and determine the types of financial disclosures that publicly held companies have to make. The SEC's role is to ensure full and fair disclosure. It does not offer any kind of guarantee that the investment merits on the investment merits of any security. So the International Accounting Standards Board, we call it the IASB, they are working with the Financial Accounting Standards Board to try to converge a uniform set of accounting and financial reporting standards that can be used by all companies that are seeking financing through any of the world's major stock markets, including those of the United States. The idea behind this is so that you will open up trade in other markets around the world and be able to invest in companies that might use foreign currency or even a foreign language, because as of now, I wouldn't invest in one of those companies because it couldn't read their annual report. But if they had a standardized way of reporting where everyone could understand it, then that opens up the market. In 2007, there were a couple of releases published. This one, the Securities Act, release number 33-8879. And under this, financial statements from foreign private issuers are going to be accepted by the SEC without reconciliation to US GAAP if they are prepared using international financial reporting standards as issued by the IASB. The Securities Act release number 338831. This is a concept release, and it states that if U.S. issuers are allowed to use IFRSs in their filings with the SEC, multinational U.S. companies operating in several countries could use just one set of accounting and financial reporting standards for all of their global operations. So the organization and structure of the SEC, it contains the Division of Corporate Finance. They develop and administer the disclosure requirements for the Securities Acts, and they review all registration statements and other issue-oriented disclosures. The Division of Enforcement, they direct the SEC's enforcement actions. The Division of Investment Management, they regulate investment advisors and investment companies. The Division of Economic and Risk Analysis, they integrate financial economics and rigorous data analytics into the core mission of the SEC. And Division of Trading and Markets, they regulate national securities exchanges, brokers, and dealers of securities. And so here we just have, again, broken down the divisions and the offices of the SEC. Again, you have the corporate finance, enforcement, investment management, economic risk and analysis, and then trading and markets. And these are the various offices of each. Some of the laws that are administered by the SEC include the Trust Indenture Act of 1939, the Investment Company Act of 1940, Investment Advisors Act of 1940, the Securities Investors Protection Act of 1970, Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act of 2010, and then Jumpstart Our Business Startups or Jobs Act of 2012. The SEC is often asked for assistance in the administration of two other major laws, and this includes the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1977 and the Federal Bankruptcy Acts. Two major regulations are Regulation S-X and Regulation S-K. They govern the preparation of financial statements and associated disclosures made in reports to the SEC. The S-X presents the rules for preparing financial statements, footnotes, and auditors' reports. And S-K covers all non-financial items such as management's discussion and analysis of the company's operations and financial position. The regulatory structure of the SEC, they have the accounting and auditing enforcement releases. They present the results of enforcement actions taken against accountants, brokers, and other participants in the filing process. The staff accounting bulletins, they allow the commission staff to make announcements on technical issues with which it is concerned as a result of reviews of SEC filings. And then finally, these last couple slides are just covering different Security Act rules and regulations, forms, and that sort of thing. And it continues on the next slide, just sort of a summary of most of the things that we just talked about, like the Regulation S-X and the AAERs. Okay, so let's take a quick little practice quiz. Which of the following statements is true about the SEC? A, the SEC was created in response to the Korean War in the mid-1950s. B, the SEC has the legal responsibility to regulate trades of securities. C, the SEC's role is to ensure full and fair disclosure and it guarantees investments. D, the SEC is managed directly by the U.S. Vice President. And E, staff accounting bulletins, SABs, allow the SEC staff to make announcements regarding government social events. Okay, so in looking at all of these, I don't think E would be right, even though the AARs or the staff accounting bulletins, I do remember reading something about making announcements, but I don't think it was about social events. I don't remember reading about the SEC being managed by the U.S. Vice President. I don't think that's right. And then the SEC's role is to ensure full and fair disclosure. That sounds right, but I don't think they guarantee investments. The SEC has legal responsibility to regulate trade of securities. That sounds like it could be the right answer. I don't think it was created in response to the Korean War. I don't remember reading anything about the Korean War. So I'm going to go with B, and that is correct. They have the legal responsibility to regulate trades of securities. So that's just a brief introduction and mini lecture on what we're going to cover this week in Chapter 14. That's the first 18 slides. There are 69 total for you to review. To make sure that you review the slides. I'm going to post this in the discussion, and I'll post a follow-up question for everyone to answer. I hope you have a great week this week. We just have one chapter to cover, so that should make you happy. And I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of math involved, so that ought to make you double happy. All right, so good luck, everybody. I'm here if you need me. Just drop me an email. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the discussion.